Real quick, if you can hit that like button, it'll help me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm, and it'll help get this video out to more people. All right, let's get going. So there's a few things that don't take a lot of effort that you can start doing today that will make you a better, more productive developer. And I wanted to make a video talking about these things because these things don't take a lot of effort at all. So the very first thing I'm gonna mention right off the bat is making sure that you use a linter. A linter is a tool that you can use to help you point out errors or possible mistakes that you're making in your code as you write it inside your text editor or IDE. Just make sure that you start using a linter early on. They're really not hard to set up. Don't be intimidated by them. If you're just learning how to code, start using a linter sooner than later. And if you're currently working as a developer and your team doesn't use linters, you should really talk to your lead and suggest implementing a linter because it can help your team write better code and it can catch potential errors. So think about using a linter if you're not already using one in a production code base right now. Like pause this video and go install a linter and then come back and finish watching this video, or finish watching this video, then go do all the things I said, because I think that'll help me more with the algorithm. All right, let's keep going. What's the next one? Formatting. It drives me bonkers, and it's almost a bit of code smell when I see bad formatting and bad indentation and just not any uniformity in someone's code when they put it up for a pull request. And you can fall to the side of saying, well, some indentation and formatting is kind of a nitpicky thing to point out in code review because people have different styles when it comes to like how they like to format their code. But I will say that if you use a formatter from the start, and if your team uses the same formatter, everyone's code will be formatted and indented the same exact way. And it's just so much nicer to be in a code base where everything's properly formatted. It drives me nuts when you go into a code base and you see code that's properly formatted and has the right spacing and indenting and all that stuff, and then you go to like another file that's the same language inside the same code base and it's just improperly indented and things aren't structured right, and you got closing parentheses and curly brackets all over the place that just aren't in the right spot. And you just have everything in the wrong spot and nothing looks uniform. And it sounds super OCD, but I mean it. Use a formatter. Most text editors and IDEs have formatters built into them. I personally like Prettier. It works really well on JavaScript. It works really well on HTML and CSS. It works really well on JSX for React. I use Angular and I think it works fine because we don't use anything like JSX. We just use HTML and I like how it formats that. VS Code also has a default formatter that's built into it that will format most programming languages for you. If not, there's always an extension for very specific programming languages that have different formatting. And just by pressing a couple buttons on my keyboard, I can format all my stuff. I try not to format on save because I don't like changing other people's code that may be formatted a certain way. But again, if you're in a code base and you have control over this stuff, you can make sure that everybody who contributes to your code has the same formatter with the same settings in place so that when they do save their stuff, all of the stuff is properly formatted and everything looks the same. And I think that's so important, and it's such a simple, easy thing to incorporate. Having proper indentation and spacing and formatting makes code easier to read. So if you can read your code easier, then you can understand what it's doing easier and you can get through it and fix whatever you're trying to fix or implement whatever you're trying to implement. When everything's improperly formatted and spaced awkwardly, or things are just in the wrong spot, like in places where nesting really matters. I've been working with a lot of RxJS lately, and there's a lot of nesting and a lot of parentheses and a lot of curly braces that go into big RxJS methods where there's a lot of observables being called. And when you have all that indentation that really helps you understand how things are flowing down the list, it's critical to help you write better code and understand what's going on. So when you don't properly indent those things, it just makes it that much harder to read and understand. So just make sure you're using a formatter. They take a couple minutes to set up and they will just make your code so much cleaner and nicer and just prettier. So go install Prettier. That was a terrible pun. I apologize. This next thing on my list is a pet peeve of mine, and it drives me nuts when I see people not do super basic stuff with keyboard shortcuts. Learn the basic keyboard shortcuts. Something like copying and pasting. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people, other developers, some experienced developers too, that when I'm helping them with their code and I'm watching them write code, that I see them highlight stuff with their mouse and then like right click it, select copy, and then go put it where they want it, and right click and select paste. And it's mind-boggling to me how people don't use even the most basic keyboard shortcuts. There's so many keyboard shortcuts that you might feel like, well, I don't want to spend that much time learning all these keyboard shortcuts. I've actually started making it an effort to start learning more keyboard shortcuts because I realized how much more efficient and productive they make me when I'm writing code. It is ridiculous. Like, really, copy, cut, paste, find, save. Those are like super basic things. Those 5 right there will save you so much time from using your mouse and right clicking to do those things. It's just crazy, like how many people I've seen that don't use them regularly. And I don't know why. They're so simple to learn. And once you start incorporating them into your daily routine, you end up using them more often, and then you start seeing how helpful they really are, and then you don't really want to use your mouse. In this book, The Pragmatic Programmer, they actually recommend that you don't touch your mouse for a whole week, and they tell you to use your keyboard to use more keyboard shortcuts. And I thought that was interesting, and I've been trying to challenge myself with that, but I just can't seem to do it, and I want to learn more Vim in order to do that. And you don't have to become like a keyboard shortcut super user, and you don't have to go out and learn Vim or anything like that. I mean, you should at least know the basics in Vim, but that's a topic for another video. But learning some keyboard shortcuts will just make you such a better developer. Set out to learn 10. Learn 10 keyboard shortcuts. Start with the 5 that I mentioned. Copy, cut, paste, save. Let's do save all. Let's do find. And I don't know. You figure out the rest. I can't think of any more right now off the top of my head, but think about whatever you're doing regularly in your text editor and think about how you can do that with a keyboard shortcut. I use a lot of editing keyboard shortcuts. I should probably make a video on keyboard shortcuts. If you want to see a video on the keyboard shortcuts that I use in VS Code, let me know in the comments and I'll make a video on that. I just thought of that. That actually might be a good video to do. I know other people have made them, and maybe sharing my common keyboard shortcuts might be helpful to new people out there who are trying to use more keyboard shortcuts in their workflow and whatnot. Learn some keyboard shortcuts. Let's get to the next thing that I jotted down here. The next thing I'm going to talk about is commenting your code. While you can't always trust what a comment says about a certain function or what something's doing, they are critical to documenting your code. And they are critical to having an idea of what's going on when you come back to something in a long time, or when someone who's never been in that class or in that method comes to it for the first time. They can have a brief rundown of what the method is even supposed to be doing, or what that class is even supposed to be doing. Sometimes people will overdo comments, and you can argue that there's no such thing as too many comments, but I tend to think that there is such thing as over commenting your code, which I would say that newer people should over comment until they develop the habit of commenting regularly, so that then they comment normally. As they grow as a developer and gain more experience, they'll understand where to comment more. But developing that habit of just writing more comments when you're first starting, or when you're like a junior developer, or even more experienced devs that try to, claim the whole, oh, I write self-documenting code. And you should still try to write self-documenting code, but you should also comment on your code as well. And you should do it regularly. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. And commenting sometimes actually helps when you're trying to figure out what you want a method to do. So you can even comment a method before you actually write it, and just kind of write like, this method is going to do this and this and this, and it should return this. And then write your method, or write your method first and then describe what it's doing in the comment. And when you fix a method or you add a feature to something that's already commented, make sure to update the comments. But just write more comments. It doesn't take a lot of time to write a few comments on your code. It'll help you out a lot in the long run, and it'll make you a much better developer. So make sure that you're commenting on code, and they should be called out in code review. And if you're working on a team, you should have a lot of comments in your code. If you're working on your own stuff, make sure you make an effort to write comments on what things are doing in your application. The last thing I want to mention in this video that will make you a much better developer and a much better programmer if you start doing them sooner than later is basic terminal commands, or bash commands, or command line commands, whatever it is, PowerShell commands. I forget what it is in Windows because I use git bash because I'm not doing like crazy stuff. I use git bash on Windows and I use the terminal on my Mac. I know enough commands to be able to navigate through stuff. I know enough commands to create a file. I know enough commands to delete a directory or create a directory. I know enough commands to get the job done, and I know enough commands to be able to Google something that I need to do in the terminal and be comfortable enough to do it. I don't know the terminal that well, but I know enough. And that's really all you need to know is enough. And if you want to be more productive when you're using the terminal, consider using aliases for a lot of the stuff that you use very often. Creating aliases help you shorten your commands, and then you don't have to type as much when you're trying to get things done in the terminal. And people that use a lot of commands and are very proficient with the command line are like super elite hackers. And when I watch people that get a lot of stuff done in the command line, they look legit and they're really fast and they get things done. And people who use Vim and or Emacs and like do everything on the keyboard and they don't touch their mouse and they're like really cool like that, more kudos to them. I'm not one of those people, but I know enough stuff to get the job done, and I know enough stuff to not be worried about it. I remember when I was first getting started, the terminal was really intimidating for me, and I was kind of nervous going in there, and it's not anything that you need to be scared of, and learning some of the basics will help you out a lot when you need to use a terminal. So make sure that you're making use of aliases and making use of your command line and making use of those tools, and try to incorporate it in your day-to-day work if it'll help you be more productive and it's the tool that you need to get the job done. And just one little tidbit to add to that, don't get hung up on having to learn everything in the terminal. I saw someone recently post that they were getting exhausted of like memorizing terminal commands, and I remember I did a little bit of that, and it was a real waste of time, because the truth is that if it's something that you need to do often enough, you'll Google it, and when you Google it enough times, you'll remember it. You don't need to sit there and go through a list of commands and try to memorize them, because the chances are many of those you're not going to use, and when the time comes to use them, you're probably not going to remember them and you're going to have to Google them anyways. So don't sit there and memorize a bunch of bash commands and whatnot, because that's probably not going to be the best place to focus on if you're just learning how to code. If you're already a programmer and you want to get a little bit better at them, go over a lot of the basic commands and use them rather than memorize them, because by using them, you'll actually eventually memorize them, if that makes any sense. Use the tool that's best for you. Also, use a GUI. I know many productive developers who use GUIs for things that they do on a regular basis, and they don't really use the command line. It doesn't really make them any less productive, but some things done in the command line are just quicker and easier. So figure out what tools are best for the job and use those tools, but don't be scared of the command line. It's really not that mysterious and scary once you actually work with it a little bit. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. Those are some things that you should be doing to make you a better, more productive developer. It doesn't matter if you're just learning how to code or if you've been programming for a while now. You should really consider some of these things if you're not already doing them, because trust me, they will make you a much better developer in the long run. All right, with all that said, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, and I'll see you next time.